weeks have been hectic. We've covered 9 cars, and now it's time to break some hearts, including my own, and go buy one. From the beginning, I've been scoring key attributes of each contestant. This has helped me keep my impressions straight as I jump from car to car across the country. That way it can make the decision-making process a little bit easier as I drive 30 hours back home. The benchmark score was set by the GR Corolla, and the numbers for each attribute are relative to 50 grand performance cars. So when I say the Ford Mustang GT gets a 10 for acceleration, it's not necessarily because I'm an uncultured, petroleum-blooded American who can't fathom electric torque or a Porsche. I just don't want an EV for driving entertainment, and I'm nowhere close to affording that kind of showroom speed. I do have a couple of disclaimers here. This series is basically impossible to quantify. Different qualities matter more to different people. In order to create this evaluation, I picked general categories that I think a lot of car enthusiasts appreciate when purchasing a new vehicle. There's a focus on the driving experience, whereas the more sensible attributes are lumped in together, so each individual one has a little bit less significance on the overall score itself. There's also a wild card opportunity for each car, which allows for extra points based on how much flair it has, how unique it is, or even how removable its roof is. Most of the cars offer something special, so there wasn't much variation here. Overall, scoring them was hard, but I only think one car didn't receive the amount of recognition it deserved. I call it the balanced assessment for long-lasting satisfaction. There's no perfect way of doing this, which is why I'm also using my own money to show you what I found to be the most compelling. So with a budget of roughly $50,000, let's talk fun cars. Now, many of these vehicles scored very close to one another, but there were a few outliers, one of them being the Ford Mustang GT at number 9. Why was it in last? Well, I may be a Mustang bro myself, but for this series, it was really too much of an oddball. Without the Dark Horse package that improves the handling and communication, it really is not a driver's car. The suspension is soft, it bounces over pavement, especially around corners, without the Magna Ride. And maybe you can get that feature in the performance package, but I didn't test that, and with packages like those, the car becomes considerably more expensive. Even if it did handle great, the quality control and the infotainment are a little rough around the edges, and the controls are my least favorite here. It's plain frustrating. I mean, people rip on the VW, but I think Ford's climate controls are less intuitive than even those. Plus, the manual mode of the 10-speed automatic leaves much to be desired. Where I could see it earning a lot of sales, though, is the engine. That 5-liter V8 was special 10 years ago, and today, it's a unicorn. 480 horsepower, a high redline, the glorious sound. That's something that no other car in this series can match. Also makes it the fastest car here. Plus, if you hook it up to the mechanical and manly 6-speed manual transmission, it's a real blast in the straight line. But again, for me, it's not compensating for the steering, the tech, or the handling. After the Ford, things got very close. We have basically the Japanese Mustang, which is the Nissan Z. And I say that because it also has more of a grand touring approach. It's fairly comfortable, yet more firm and handles better than the Mustang. And the engine actually feels like it has more mid-range grunt. 400 horsepower will easily roast the rear tires. In both good and bad ways, it feels old. You can feel all the vibrations through the gear lever, kind of like a BMW gearbox from the last decade. But it's easy to use nonetheless, and the steering actually gives you feedback. However, the Nissan fumbles almost all of the details. The throttle tuning is borderline erratic at times, and when you have that much power and turbo lag, it reduces my confidence when I'm pushing the car. That sensation is further exaggerated by the suspension that is definitely more soft than what I would want from a sports car, and the steering itself also has a little bit of vagueness on center. And when you combine that with soft suspension, it can cause you to turn the wheel more than necessary as you wait for the Z to actually change direction. You also won't have a limited slip differential at the $44,000 base model, another thing you'd want to fix in the aftermarket. The Z would be great for the person who plans on modifying their car anyway. If you added a different suspension in that and retuned the throttle mapping, maybe upgraded the brakes if you didn't get the performance version, that could be a much better car, but I'm scoring it as it is, and that's where it's gonna land for me, which was a little frustrating because I also just love the aesthetics. That thing stands out anywhere it goes, and it really didn't feel that way when I first saw the photos. It's just grown on me so much. For number 7, we're gonna have the Golf R. Wait, no. Now hear me out, VW bros, I'm not dissing the car. If this was what is the best all-around enthusiast daily, the Golf R might win that. It's really good at about everything. It handles with agility. The all-wheel drive puts the power down well. It doesn't feel as understeer heavy as I was thinking either. The dual clutch is snappy. The engine kicks you in the gut with mid-range power. It sounds aggressive for a 4-pot too, but the satisfaction just isn't there. It's not a big fan of high revs. The soon-dead manual doesn't speak much to my hands. And the same goes for the steering. The capacitive control overload can also be a nuisance on an otherwise well-thought-out, comfortable interior. For 2025, they lit up the climate and volume sliders, but now that they dropped the manual transmission, I think the enthusiast appeal has shrunk. Moving on, the car that I am very reluctantly placing in 6th is the Toyota GR86. I'd argue that this one is the best sports car because the balance and the handling overall are just phenomenal. The steering is fast, it gives good feedback. The manual transmission is a little notchy, but the throws and the clutch pedal are really short, so it gives off a race car feel. It also has a high revving, naturally aspirated engine. And it's practical enough. At 6'3", I fit well. The trunk is large when you fold the seats, and the ride is notably more forgiving than my GR Corolla. Maybe it requires a magician to fit an adult in the back seat, and maybe the tech is horribly outdated and it doesn't get very good gas mileage, but it's so lovable and easily earns my recommendation. It's such a great vehicle for the average enthusiast that I really think it ought to place ahead of the next 2 cars. The next car was a respectable contender, and in my opinion, makes the best blend of performance, livability, and price, and that is the Hyundai Elantra N. The star of the show is the handling. The front end feels sharp. It digs in around any corner. It also has good mid-range power. The exhaust is the right amount of obnoxious. The interior is fairly well built. The back seat and trunk are more than usable. The dual clutch transmission is well tuned and can rapid fire gears, and it costs around $36,000. However, for manual transmission enthusiasts, that gearbox is the least satisfying of the bunch. The steering itself is fast and precise, but unless you're really pushing it, it feels numb, which makes just driving around some nice back roads less rewarding than it is in some of the other cars that place ahead of it. The next car is tied with the Hyundai, the Toyota GR Corolla. I'm giving it the higher position because I think the all-wheel drive advantage makes it more enjoyable in a wider variety of settings. But the position between these two is pretty interchangeable. So as I've said many times before, this really reminds me of the old Japanese rally cars for the street. The turbocharged engine has some lag, but once you get it into boost, it punches all the way up to the red line. The 3 cylinders make a unique sound, stiff suspension remains very controlled when the pavement isn't perfect, and the all-wheel drive keeps you on that road no matter what may be covering it. I love the confidence this vehicle gives me, even on the track when you have the Michelin Pilot Sport 4S tires, which unfortunately do not come in here stock. But even with the standard rubber, the chassis rotates well under braking and throttle inputs. The gearbox is fairly satisfying. Toyota did add an automatic transmission option for 2025, if that's really what you want in a car like this, or you can't drive one with 3 pedals. And they've also added more engine cooling and supposedly improved the suspension. I would have really hoped that they'd add some hardware to keep the all-wheel drive system from overheating during summer hot laps, but it does seem like they've made software tweaks in the refresh that could have a small effect on that. Now that the performance package is standard, it should still start at about $40,000. And while the interior is tight in some places and feels cheap, and the ride quality can be punishing, the performance that you're getting here with all-wheel drive and the overall experience, I think more than justifies the price. However, about midway through this series, I realized that I was not replacing my own GR Corolla with another. Now, we're on to the finalists. At number 3, according to the scoreboard, we have the Mazda MX-5 Miata. The MX-5 is one of the most entertaining ways to get from point A to B, regardless of price point, but it doesn't top the list today. While it has some solid build quality and low running costs, it gives up numerous points in the daily categories. It's not very practical. It's quite loud. The ride, while not punishing, can get choppy if the pavement isn't perfectly smooth. but really in about every place except for the highway, it's a joy to drive. You can drop the top in a few seconds. You have to shift quite a bit, which means interacting with the best gearbox in today's competition. It's extremely mechanical. It feels like the car is communicating to you in Braille. The short clutch has a very predictable take. The engine, while down on torque, is wonderfully linear and honestly not too slow until you get past 60 miles per hour. But you'll definitely have the biggest smile on your face around corners. Every large and small input that you give to the pedals and the steering results in a direct response from the car. It's got a decent amount of body roll, which is why the handling score isn't higher, but that can be fixed, and the communication and tuning is great. I really love the weight of the steering, and because it's geared so aggressively, you're always shifting. Unless we're talking outright performance, it's really hard to overstate how good the Miata is. However, numbers 1 and 2 absolutely crushed everything else for one reason. While all of the other cars here make some sort of trade-off between categories, the Honda Civic Type R at number 2 does not. As it should, because it's $46,000. But man, if you can afford it, it's got a convincing argument. The handling is sharp enough to be on the no-fly list, and the Plus R fake engine noise is silly enough to have its own stand-up special. But this is a weapon on the track, and it's a tool on a dry back road. Even with front-wheel drive, it puts the power down. The steering gives a little feedback, and I love how it builds up in weight. It's pinpoint accurate, and the body roll is minimal. Even in its comfort dampening setting, which I would recommend keeping it in, as the other settings do tend to get bouncy, the gearbox is also wonderfully slick. It's light and easy to operate. It has relatively short throws. It's very precise, and the way it clicks through the gears is second to only the Mazda in pure satisfaction. And once you get past the launch, it is fast. But not only is it capable and fun, it's also the most practical car here, with a nice back seat, a big trunk, and good storage. And the interior is also built better than most of the cars here. And outside of completely shutting off the traction control, the tech is easy to use. The only thing it falls short on is price, but because this is an imperfect scoring card, that doesn't make a huge effect on the end result. I also think it's worth noting that the Honda is probably the car most common to be found with a dealer markup, something that doesn't seem to affect the next car as much, the Integra Type S. I don't think this deserves to be in the main part of this competition. The reason why I included it was simple. Some people might be able to stretch that 50 grand budget to 53 grand, and I was curious if it was worth doing so with the Acura. The answer has been a mild yes. It bests the Honda by just 1 point. Mechanically, even down to the suspension, it's the same as the Honda. Acura just has their own control system for the adaptive dampening, which improves the ride quality. It's also a quieter car. It comes with more features and a less polarizing aesthetic inside and out. It looks a lot more grown up, whereas the Civic Type R is quite simply a whole lot of red. So, if it wins, does that mean that's what I'm gonna buy? No, 1, because I can't afford it, and 2, if I try hard enough, I think I might be able to find a Civic Type R without a markup. Because the Acura costs over $50,000, it seems like the winner of the series, at least according to the numbers, is the Civic Type R. The biggest truth of this series is that no matter what your priorities are, right now, there's probably a car that checks your boxes. We'll get to my winner in a second, but before any comment section brawl, I want to get one thing across. This ranking is based on my impressions and perspective. If I've learned anything in the last 6 years, it's that my opinion is still just that. I can tell you specs, I can tell you what I feel, I can make a joke or two, and I can make it all look visually appealing, but in the end, while I try to be as rational as possible, I am only one of billions of voices on the internet. When I set out on this series, my goal was to find out how I wanted to remember internal combustion. If you want to remember it through childish body panels and sharp handling that's ready for the track, you could get the daily-friendly Elantra N. If you want the confident, old-school rally homologation feel, go GR Corolla. If you want a juggernaut hot hatch with comfort for the everyday, there's the Golf R. While it's more casual without the dark horse pack, if you want a V8 cruiser, look no further than the Mustang GT. If you like that, but your style is more Japanese and turbocharged, pick up a Z. And if you look at those and you want the opposite from a rear-wheel drive sports car, you can get the nostalgic, lightweight legend with impeccable handling, the GR86. If you're loaded and you want fun without sacrificing an upscale touch, the Integra Type S is worth the extra cash if front-wheel drive isn't too much of a sin for you. For me, I'm stuck between the sports car masquerading as a hatchback and a reliable Mazda masquerading as a classic roadster. My biggest problem in making this decision is the fear of missing out. Part of me says each are amazing with their own distinct advantages, but because I don't have high practical needs for my commuter, I should save my money. But then I think about how the Type R would be much more comfortable. The sound system is better. I can rely on it as a daily for longer, and then I'm back to wanting the Honda. So I get ready to put a deposit down over the phone, and as I'm dialing, I think, what other time in my life would I be able to daily, or even just buy a new car as pure as the ND? Both are a one-of-a-kind vehicle in their own ways, but the MX-5 lives on a different planet from the current market. I will not regret buying one. However, if the Type R is at MSRP, I can trade out of it incredibly easy. But the Mazda has special financing which compensates for its worse resale value, and it's cheaper to fuel. I've begun to bore myself and pity those who have discussed this topic with me. Yet this has also made me feel so incredibly lucky. If this is the most pressing thing on my mind, I'm in the best spot mentally that I've ever been in by a long shot. So thank you for making this a possibility and sharing my passion for cars. It's time to make a decision and keep moving forward. We'll talk more soon. Thanks for watching.